The desert was still. New Mexico's summer sun rose slow and silent over the barren plains of Lincoln County on the morning of July 2nd, 1947. Just another dry day, or so it seemed, until it wasn't. A sudden low thunder rattled the skies, a sound like a distant explosion, dull yet piercing, and then silence again. That same day, Mac Brazel, a rancher used to the isolation of the open range, stumbled upon a field unlike anything he'd seen before. His sheep refused to cross it. The animals sensed what he didn't yet understand. Scattered across his pasture were pieces of something, not wood, not metal, not fabric, but a strange composite of shiny foil-like sheets that crumpled but bounced back to shape. He found I-beam structures, light as balsa but impossibly strong. On some surfaces there were symbols, not letters, not numbers, but geometric glyphs that looked like something from an alien alphabet. Mac wasn't an educated man, but even he knew this wasn't a weather balloon or scrap from a plane. This was otherworldly. So he did what any citizen might. He contacted the local sheriff, who alerted the nearby Roswell Army airfield. Within hours, the military descended like a storm. Uniformed men, trucks, silence. Orders barked in clipped tones. The debris was gathered, scooped into crates covered with tarps. Mac was taken in for questioning, for days. When he returned, he didn't speak much, but the light in his eyes had changed. He'd been warned. You saw nothing, you say nothing. Just 6 days later, July 8, 1947, a press officer at the Roswell base issued a statement that would echo for generations. It was printed in the Roswell Daily Record and reprinted in papers across the globe. The military had just confirmed what many in America were already whispering. We are not alone. But then, the pivot. Within hours, the story was retracted. A new headline emerged. Air Force says disc was just a weather balloon. Suddenly, the men who had been so sure of their words grew vague. A press conference was staged. Officers posed with mangled aluminum wooden struts and what looked like a child's kite. This was the real wreckage, they claimed. Case closed. But the switch was too abrupt, the language too rehearsed. The truth, it seemed, had already escaped the bottle. The public began to wonder, why lie? Why confirm something as radical as a flying disc only to backtrack immediately? And if this was really just a weather balloon, why the sudden lockdown, the secrecy, the confiscation of debris and the silencing of witnesses? The questions were louder than the answers. The military locked down the site where the debris had fallen. They took control of the narrative and made sure no other version saw daylight. Witnesses like Mac Brazel were pressured. Some say he was detained for days, others claim he was threatened. His neighbours described him as a changed man when he returned, nervous, withdrawn, frightened. Local journalists who had rushed to follow the story were suddenly stonewalled. Editors received calls from government officials urging restraint. Cameras were banned, interviews cancelled, and the wreckage gone. Behind the scenes, rumours began to swirl. Military insiders whispered of strange bodies loaded into black crates and taken under armed guard to secure locations. Men who had seen things they weren't supposed to see were reassigned, discharged, or simply silenced. Roswell wasn't just an incident anymore. It had become a mystery, soaked in paranoia, fueled by contradiction, and buried beneath a thick layer of fear. For years, silence was the official policy. But in the 1990s, nearly half a century later, the US government made a surprising move. They released a report. Roswell, they said, was never about aliens. It wasn't about UFOs. It was about a top-secret program called Project Mogul. This program, launched in the shadow of the Cold War, involved high-altitude balloons equipped with sensitive acoustic equipment designed to detect Soviet nuclear detonations from afar. The wreckage, they claimed, was simply from one of these balloons. The materials? Exotic, yes, but experimental, not extraterrestrial. To some, the explanation made sense. It was detailed, technical, and full of historical context. But to others, especially those who had seen the wreckage with their own eyes, it was just another cover story. Because none of the witnesses ever described wires, rubber, or microphones, they spoke of memory metal that reshaped itself, beams with strange writing, materials that defied logic and physics, and then there were the bodies. By the 1980s and 90s, many of those present in 1947 had either passed on or grown old. Some, no longer bound by active service, began to talk, and what they said was shocking. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who handled the wreckage, gave a televised interview late in life. He spoke calmly but firmly. "This was not a weather balloon. I was there. I handled it. It was not made by human hands." He recalled foil that could not be torn, shattered or burned. He remembered symbols, unlike any earthly language, etched or printed across beams and fragments. He recalled how the wreckage shown to the press was swapped before cameras arrived. Then came others. A nurse from the Roswell Army Hospital allegedly saw small, non-human bodies brought in under heavy secrecy. Grey skin, thin limbs, large, domed heads. She was transferred soon after. Some say she vanished. Family members of base personnel told stories passed down in whispers of crates sealed and shipped under military guard, of orders not to speak or else. And perhaps the most unsettling part, these stories were eerily consistent, told by people who had never met, scattered across states and decades. If it was just a balloon, why all this? As testimonies mounted, a new location emerged from the shadows: Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. Multiple sources claimed that the Roswell debris and the bodies were quietly flown there under maximum secrecy. Within its fortified hangars was a place known in hushed tones as Hangar 18. To some, it was just an internal joke. To others, it was the vault where recovered alien craft, biological samples and unexplainable technology were stored and studied, far from public scrutiny. The base was never officially linked to Roswell, but strange things happened there. Visitors were turned away. High-clearance scientists worked behind locked doors. Entire wings of buildings were off-limits, even to senior personnel. Decades later, whistleblowers claimed that reverse engineering efforts had taken place, efforts to unlock the propulsion systems, materials and energy sources of the crashed craft. Some suggested this was the true origin of technologies that seemed to appear suddenly in the late 20th century. Fiber optics, night vision, microchips. Coincidence? Or the spoils of something not of this earth? If it was just a balloon, why the intimidation? Why the misdirection? Why the silence? This is the question that echoes through every retelling of the Roswell story. Some suggest the cover-up was born out of fear, not of the crash itself, but of what its discovery would mean. In 1947, the world was fragile. War had just ended. The atomic age had begun. The Cold War was brewing. Imagine revealing to the public that Earth had been visited by an intelligence far superior, far more advanced, not gods, not spirits, but physical beings from somewhere else. Religions might crumble, societies might collapse, military and political control might fracture overnight. So, the story goes, the government made a choice: hide the truth to preserve order. But others, more cynical, perhaps more realistic, believed the truth was far less noble. The wreckage didn't just represent life beyond Earth, it represented power. Technology light years ahead of anything mankind had ever built. Energy sources, propulsion systems, materials that defied known science. To possess it was to leap ahead, militarily, economically, globally. So rather than share it, or even admit it existed, it was cloaked, controlled, and commodified. And here's where it gets darker. There are those who claim the government is no longer in charge, that what was recovered at Roswell, and in other incidents since, has been passed into the hands of private defense contractors. Corporations with no obligation to disclose, no congressional oversight, and no public accountability. In that world, secrecy isn't about protecting the people. It's about protecting the advantage. And the silence, it's not fear, it's strategy. While the government tightened its grip, the myth of Roswell broke free. It escaped into books, movies, late-night radio, internet forums. Roswell became more than an event. It became a symbol of doubt, of hidden truths, of the feeling that what we're told isn't always what's real. The town itself transformed. What was once a sleepy desert community became the epicenter of alien folklore. Museums opened, gift shops sold rubber alien heads, and every year tens of thousands flocked to the Roswell UFO Festival, not just to celebrate but to ask the same question: what really happened out there? The image of the grey alien with its big eyes and small frame was born here. So too was the modern UFO movement, and with it, the quiet revolution of civilian disclosure, a community of investigators, researchers and truth-seekers who refuse to let Roswell fade into a forgotten footnote. It is said that the most powerful stories are those the authorities try hardest to bury. Roswell wasn't buried, it was planted, and decades later it grew into legend. For decades, the official position remained unchanged. But in the last few years, something shifted. Beginning in 2017, major news outlets, the New York Times, Politico, the Washington Post, began reporting on classified programs investigating unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. Suddenly, the Pentagon was admitting that encounters had occurred, that video evidence existed, that military pilots had seen craft defying the known laws of physics, making impossible maneuvers, accelerating at unimaginable speeds with no visible means of propulsion. And these weren't theories, they were on camera. Infrared footage captured by FA-18 Super Hornet pilots. The government said, "We don't know what these are." Then came 2023. A former intelligence officer named David Grush went before Congress under oath. His testimony stunned the world. Grush claimed he had access to classified programs dealing with recovered non-human craft. Not one, but multiple vehicles, in various states of intactness. He stated explicitly, these are not of human origin, and the US has retrieved non-human biologicals. He alleged a decades-long effort to conceal this truth, involving threats, intimidation, and the unauthorized transfer of recovered materials to private aerospace companies. When asked if he feared retaliation for speaking out, Grush didn't hesitate. It's already happened. The silence of Roswell had been cracked, and through that crack, the light of something enormous began to shine. So, what really fell to Earth in July 1947? Was it an experimental balloon that drifted too far? Was it an early Cold War accident, quickly hidden to avoid international scandal? Or was it something more, something not human? The answer may lie buried beneath decades of redacted documents, sealed basements and erased recordings, but the impact of Roswell is undeniable. It changed how we view the skies. It changed how we trust authority. And it changed how we ask questions, louder, deeper, and without apology. Perhaps the greatest legacy of Roswell isn't what happened, but that people refuse to stop asking. And so we ask, are we alone? And maybe more chilling, if we're not, who's in control of that truth? Maybe one day the sky will open again and something will fall, not to be hidden but to be revealed. Not a whisper, but a revelation. Until then, we keep watching, we keep wondering, and above all, we remember.